Complaining is always about what is wrong and what is missing. And the opposite of complaining is gratitude, which is about what is present and what is working. Most people walk around talking about what's wrong and what's missing, not realizing that that sets their parameters and they are no longer looking for advantages or opportunities, certainly not to the extent of others.
At Mechanism, we build iconic brands with soul and science. The soul is culturally relevant brand building, and the science is the always-on marketing activities that drive the bottom line. Learn more at mechanism.com. A small action, when done consistently, can have huge results. But actually doing it every day, well, that's the hard part. Take complaining, for example. We all do it because it's natural and it's an easy habit to fall into. But constant attention to negativity can obviously pull your focus away from what's possible and even start to shut down creativity and productivity. Well, today I'm talking with Will Bowen, who's working on unlocking the secrets of positivity with this complaint-free movement. Will started his career as an advertising executive for Yellowpages, but even way back then, he felt a passion for speaking and helping people discover a better way to live. In 2006, as a pastor, Will challenged his congregation to break the destructive habit of complaining by going 21 days in a row without speaking a single complaint. Fast forward to 20 years later, he's still traveling the country as a keynote speaker and working to change the lives and minds of thousands of professionals. His international best-selling book, A Complaint-Free World, has sold over 4 million copies in over 40 countries. In today's episode, you'll learn how much damage the simple habit of complaining is doing to your workflow and your team's productivity when it matters most. You'll learn some practical tools to help you become more aware of your own tendency toward complaining and start living more positively. And you'll learn what happens when you step outside a negative headspace and redefine your values. All right, Soul and Science listeners, let's dive in and learn about the soul and science of how to start a movement. All right, well, I do know your background, but a lot of listeners might not. So I'd love to hear about your journey to what got you to where you are. Obviously, you were a pastor in your past. Was being a pastor sort of in the family?
No.
No, it wasn't. Okay, tell me about that.
No, not at all. I was in radio and I moved into radio sales and radio management and didn't do very well in sales. So I started listening to all of these motivational speakers on cassettes. And I thought, that would be great. I'd love to have that career where you get to travel, impact people's lives, get paid. But I had no idea what I would ever speak on, had no topic. And then I felt guided in my early 30s to pursue ministry because that allows you to speak on a new topic every week. You're constantly writing and talking. And then 10 months in, I did a series on Edwin Gaines' book, The 4 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity. And I say 10 months in, it was 10 months in my first church. And in the book, she recommends that people go 21 days in a row without complaining. If you want to attract things to you, which is prosperity, you don't want to be complaining about what you have. Wayne Dyer put it so well. He said, if you're unhappy with what you have, why would you want more? So I did this talk and it occurred to me that how would you know what day you're on? If your goal is to go 21 days in a row, how would you know? And I handed out these purple bracelets and we gave them out over the weekend to 3 different groups. We gave 250 with the encouragement to every time you catch yourself complaining, you take it off one wrist and you move it to the other wrist. Your goal is to go 21 days in a row. You're on day 1. Every time you switch it, you're back on day 1. And the idea just exploded. It just within 30 days, we had requests for 9,000 of the bracelets, and we are at over 15 million. We estimate now closing in on 16 million worldwide people who have taken the challenge.
And tell me, before we get to the purple bracelet and that breakthrough moment, how does someone become a pastor?
I was very active in what's called unity, which is an interdenominational faith. It believes that all faiths are correct. And so I really resonated with that. And it actually took me 10 years of taking home study classes, going out to Unity Village for extended periods of time before I was accepted. And then it's 2 years of seminary, just like any other faith.
You're in your 40s by the time you're a pastor, right?
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so were you working while you were taking those courses?
Yes, I was. I was at that point, I was selling Yellowpage advertising. That's how long
Oh,
ago
wow.
that was.
You did 2 years of seminary, and then 2006, you were 10 months into that, sort of running that church, that you had this breakthrough idea?
Yes, that's exactly right. I had been there just 10 months and was doing it was just a normal talk. I was kind of known for handing out what my church secretary called tchotchkes, and in this case we handed out the purple bracelets, and it was that linking of physical and mental, of speaking and linking your body, that I think is what just caught fire. Yeah.
And did the bracelet have "Stop Complaining, Start Living" written on it?
Not at that time. It
Not at
said,
that time.
we bought them from a company that did school spirit bracelets. So they
Okay.
said spirit on them.
It said "Spirit."
Yeah,
Okay.
it just said spirit. And then ultimately we had them, and now they say a complaintfreeworld.org.
Where were you in your life where you were like, people complaining, that's the thing I want to focus on?
It's interesting because I did it simply because it was the next step in the book, that I approached the 21 days and did the talk and did the bracelet and everything, because it was a 4-part series I think I was doing, because it was the 4 spiritual laws of prosperity by Edwin Gaines. And as I did it, I realized what was interesting was, all of a sudden, as I started doing interviews, Oprah, Wall Street Journal, they started asking me all these questions about complaining. I really didn't know much about it. And so I just studied to learn everything that I could about it. And we are immersed in it and we don't even realize it. The analogy I like to use is like when I was a kid and everyone smoked around me, including my pediatrician. We're surrounded by complaining and we just don't realize it. And that came up in this process of me taking people on this journey. And I even, after speaking professionally, because I do 30 plus speeches a year to associations and et cetera. After doing it for like 7 years, I was getting kind of bored with it. And then I realized, but no one's presenting it like I am, and it's really having a great impact. And so I recommitted to it. And it's something I really love and find to be very fascinating.
It started with your congregation. Then was it like each member got their family and friends involved, and it kind of, is that how it spread?
Yeah, it was really crazy, Jason. In 2006, of course, we didn't have Facebook. We didn't have smartphones, anything like that. Just from people telling people, emailing their friends, hey, we did this thing. We were not a mega church. I think we only handed out 250 bracelets that weekend. Within 30 days, people telling people that, they wanted them for their 3rd grade class. They wanted them for their legal office. They wanted them for everything. And we had requests for close to 9,000 bracelets, just people telling people.
What was that feeling like at the time? Were you just like blown away?
Overwhelming. It was overwhelming. It's so funny because it sounds like, wow, this has been so great and everything, but there have been so many ups and downs. And we had volunteers packing these bracelets for a few hours on Saturdays. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're not packing 500, we're packing 5,000 and then 10,000. And then after being on Oprah, we had requests for over 2 million.
Amazing.
And it was crazy.
I love that.
Yeah.
And how did you decide that this mission was your new church and you weren't going to be a pastor anymore? I'm going to turn this into a best-selling book and try to reach millions and millions of people with this message.
What happened was I was on the Oprah Winfrey Show in 2007, and then there was a bidding war for the rights to my book, and Random House won. And then I wrote the book. It started doing very well in the United States, but extremely well in other countries. It was the biggest selling book in all of China in 2007.
That's crazy. In China?
I know, isn't it?
Wow.
We still, that book still sells 250,000 copies a year in China.
Because I think of China as a complaint-free country
Already, right?
Right? Already
Yes.
by culturalization that's really fascinating to me. Okay, so back to when you made that decision, was there pressure on you to remain at the church?
Well, what was happening was I brought in an associate minister and I was doing a lot of speaking gigs. And so I would be gone during the week, but I would be home for everything else. And the associate minister would handle the ministerial crises. You know, I just found out my child is sick or whatever, those kinds of things, go to the hospital. But some people were resenting the fact that I was having a dual career and doing really, really well at it. And I've always been more of a preacher than a minister. I'm really good at speaking on stage, and I can do the hand holding in the hospital and all that and the funerals and everything, but it's never been my forte. And so it just occurred to me, why don't I'm speaking to millions of people here. Here I'm speaking to 500 on a weekend. I'd rather do this and also get to enjoy the benefits of the life of travel, et cetera, without having the board meetings and the ladies flower club on Thursdays that you're expected to meet, just little things like that. That just was not me.
You just recently have a new edition out in March of this year. How does a movement sustain for that period of time? That's my question, because you would think that a decade in, you'd be like, all right, now I've got to find my next calling, another movement I'm going to start. But this one's still taking off and really internationally exploding. So how does something like that sustain?
I think it's a number of things, but I feel like I've been extremely lucky. It's just like I didn't do anything to make the book do so well in China. It just did. So I don't take a lot of credit for that. However, I do think it's because I've put out tons of content in the interim time. I've shot over 800 videos myself. And when I speak, a lot of times people will want to take the challenge for themselves, their business, et cetera, et cetera. And we've built a pretty good email list. I think we've got about 15,000 people now, which isn't huge, but I send them something every day and tell them about it. And it just kind of keeps it going.
And have you been speaking? Do you speak all over the world?
Mm-hmm.
And how do people find you? Do you have like a speaking agent?
I actually have a team. I have a team of people. I have a guy in Kenya who uses what's called an Intel search engine to find speaking opportunities. And when he finds them, I've got a guy in the Philippines who puts them into email lists. And the whole thing, the goal is to get them on the phone with my business manager who tells them my rates, availability, et cetera, and closes them. So got a whole system.
So there's a word of mouth thing that happens and people call you, and then you have an outbound sales team as well.
Probably half, Jason, of my speeches are from people who have seen me before and go back and talk to somebody. Oh, we got to have this guy.
What is Will Bowen particularly good at that makes this movement sticky? What makes you very good at what you do?
My passion for the subject. I mean, I get a Google alert every single afternoon wherever the word complain has popped up. And I usually, chase that rabbit and read every book I find on the subject. I do think it's my passion. And I also think that I'm really lucky in that early on, without intention, I got a degree in broadcast journalism. So I spent a lot of time writing. I've written for decades. I've written. before I ever wrote my first book. And I spent decades speaking in what I call TLCs, tiny little churches, before I ever got on a stage speaking to 6,000 insurance executives. So I just think honing those two skills has helped to keep it going.
How would you explain the idea of the complaint-free movement and the idea of people starting to live? Give me like the escalator.
Elevator.
Yeah. Or the escalator pitch.
Well, I always say I speak on, I'm the world authority on complaining, what's wrong with it, why we do it, and how to get ourselves and others to stop. Because once we start to realize that there are some very negative repercussions to our bodies, to our health, to our minds, to our relationships in complaining, then we start to understand that people only complain to get their social needs met. We can reframe in our own minds and ask more directly for what we want, and also not get burned out and dragged down by other people's comments as much.
We have the narrative, the voice in our head of complaints, right? We have the narrative that I don't have this, I screwed that up, or I didn't do that right. We have that voice, that complaining, whiny voice in our own head. And then we also have it in a social setting where we're disparaging other people or we're talking about something in a negative way. Those are kind of two ways I think about it. You know, the voice in our head and then the voice to others.
As you know, I'm sure, Jason, we have a negativity bias. Human beings have a negativity bias. We are biased towards the negative, and that is what's kept us alive as a species. Therefore, we improve when we take a harsh look at ourselves or whatever. We can, of course, go way too far with that. The dictionary definition of complain is to express grief, pain, or discontent. So it must be expressed, it must be written, it must be spoken. The thoughts in our heads are not technically complaints, they're just expressions of that negativity bias. Once a complaint is spoken, what you speak into the world, you then attract to you. Complaining is always about what is wrong and what is missing. And the opposite of complaining is gratitude, which is about what is present and what is working. And so most people walk around just again to get their social needs met, talking about what's wrong and what's missing, not realizing that that sets their parameters and they are no longer looking for advantages or opportunities, certainly not to the extent of others.
Having a grateful mindset is kind of the outcome of the 21-day complaint-free challenge.
Yes. The way I like to explain it, especially when I'm speaking to companies, is imagine that your brain is a manufacturer and your mouth is a customer. And so you've got negative thought, complaint, negative thought, complaint, negative thought, complaint. Well, you take the 21-day challenge and you actively don't complain, you're still going to need to find ways to get your social needs met. So what happens is the manufacturer in your head retools and begins to look for good things as opposed to bad things. Because the bad things that we're talking about are there for, as I mentioned in my book, to, 5 reasons: get attention, remove responsibility, etc. And we do that as a way of connecting with other people and maintaining or elevating our social status. My dream in life is for 78 million people to take the challenge. That's 1% of the world. That just would seem to me like it would have a dramatic impact. And we're already at 15 million. So I'd love to see that many people. And I often think about how many complaints have not happened from people taking this challenge. And that's pretty exciting.
You only have 63 million people to go.
That's all.
And then
I figured this podcast will do it.
This will help. This will definitely help. So what happens in your personal life when you complain about something?
People let me know.
What do they say? Like,
hey, Mr. No Complaint Guy, or hey, was that a complaint? I was texting with 2 other speakers that are all friends. And you know how guys are. They give each other static and everything. And I was giving this one guy the business and he was like, oh, complaining, are we? Yeah, okay. Maybe technically.
That's amazing. And then When someone's done with the 21-day challenge, what do they do with the purple bracelet?
Most people keep it on. It becomes a matter of pride. And as you read in the book, the number one outcome of people taking the complaint free challenge is they become happier. So we send them, if they let us know they made the 21 days, we will create and send them a certificate of happiness and certify them a happy person.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
They're certified happy. Have you had a lot of times where people have fallen off the wagon?
Absolutely.
Like, do people usually take the challenge more than one time?
Many people will do it multiple times. A lot of people will try it and then go, oh, I'm tired of this. And they'll throw the bracelet in a drawer. People always ask me, they say, oh, I wish I could get my kids to do it. And what we found is kids do it better than adults because kids go, oh, I complain, time to switch my bracelet. It's a game. But adults go, doggone, I got to switch this stupid thing.
Right. And also kids, their brains are younger. They're not so hardwired into that mindset as well.
That's a good
right?
point.
Like they're fresher.
Yeah.
I think we're in a unique period of time where we're in a mental health crisis and where social connections are at a real deficit and people are really struggling more than they ever have. And especially young people. I love your mission. And I think getting young people thinking about your message, I think is particularly important now.
I agree. I think there's so much FOMO going on in a literal sense of not having what other people have. And as I'm sure you've seen, people who spend a lot of time on social media tend to be less happy because they compare themselves disfavorably to other people. The other thing I find interesting, and this is something I was looking at not long ago, and that is that when things get better, like I was just talking to a prospective client, and it's a tourism, state tourism department for New Jersey. And I said, one of the things that's interesting is that as you do a better job, complaints don't diminish. People just become more entitled and expectant of what you're doing. They're still going to complain for those 5 reasons. And they're still going to find a way to use complaining as an avenue to get their social needs met.
What's the upside there?
You take it in and you realize that when it comes to getting people to stop complaining, to like in a service industry, there's no there because a lot of times people are doing it to brag, to show their high standards or to get other people on their side, etc. So when I talk about complaining, I think a lot of times people are going to say, shut up and suck up whatever comes your way. And that's not the truth. It's about practicing healthy communication skills.
And also for those businesses that you speak with, it's about helping their culture and the way they interact with each other for sure. But for the customer standpoint, you understand where the complaint's coming from. Like you understand what is behind the complaint and what they are trying to achieve with the complaint so you can tackle that complaint better.
Absolutely. It's contextualizing. It's going, okay, well, this person is not really upset about the temperature of their coffee. They're upset about the fact that no one maybe is giving them the recognition they feel like they deserve. And so they're trying to show, that their standards are so high, et cetera, that you don't meet them.
How do you chip away at that massive goal? Because you have a massive goal and you've got to reach millions and millions of people. Do you do that just by, I guess, one tool is the book, one tool is speaking? Are there other tools you employ?
Well, active social media presence, of course. I am working on a television show. To me, I think that would be the greatest way to reach the most number of people. And since we've had people in 106 countries take the challenge, I think we would be in good situation to launch it into multiple countries. So I've met with a couple of people. I'm meeting with somebody else next week. And we're just sort of testing it out. It's got to be fun. It's got to have the 21-day challenge in it. I see it as a reality show where people are taking the challenge and like competing. So yeah, that's it.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
That's a good idea. Coming to a streaming service near you. The reality angle is really interesting one. And I think that would be more interesting than, couple to thruple or whatever, a reality show is next. It's a reality show that would be fun to watch, but also with a positive message. When you think about social media and digital platforms and spreading the message, do you find that that is just experimenting and trying to find the 10 videos that take off, caught the right tone at the right time, and you just keep pumping out that content?
Honestly, I created so much content during COVID and shot lots and lots of videos that we are recycling both my videos and my little daily posts. But like the other day, I had a daily post that I did on my Facebook page and it had 400 shares. So, of course, we look at that and go, okay, I think we need to boost this. This is obviously striking people with the right message at the right time.
Now you're doing this for so long. How do you keep yourself inspired?
I just love what I do. It's funny, as a speaker, I have the world's best topic and I have the world's worst topic because it's so unique and so interesting. If people have a chance to hear me, they're like, wow, that's so cool. It's so interesting, etc. But when they hear I'm going to talk about complaining, they just think it's going to be boring and kvetching the whole time.
Well, fetching. Well, how do you frame that up? Like if I was going to have people come and speak at my advertising business, my advertising agency to a pretty young audience, and I said, come listen to Will talk about a complaint-free world, people would immediately think as the CEO that I'm trying to get everyone to work harder and, shut up. You know what I mean? So how would someone frame that up?
Well, it's funny because a lot of times they'll bring me in wanting me to address the complaints that are going on in their organization, but they don't want me to say that. So what I say is, all of you Volvo mechanical service managers, which I spoke to one time, I was like, you guys deal with complaints and complainers more than anybody. So I'm here to help you dealing with them. However, everybody comes through the line afterwards and shakes my hand and goes, man, you were talking right to me. You were talking. So I do it, but I contextualize it in that I'm helping them deal with the volume of complaints.
So we have a lot of CMOs, a lot of brand people that listen to this podcast. Like this is a marketing and advertising podcast primarily. Give me some examples of the outsized impact you've had speaking to those different companies and those brands as a result.
I had a bank have me in and talk to spend 2 days with their 600 employees and help them understand the real motivation behind the complaints they are hearing and how to turn those around into collaborations. And it was really impactful. General Electric, interestingly enough, they didn't hire me to speak. They decided they were going to take my books and my programs and my bracelets and do it themselves. And I thought, that's great. And then they sent me a thing where they measured in the productivity in the department where they did this went up 16%
Amazing.
as a result of people doing that. My favorite story is not a big company. It's a hair salon in Houston, Texas. This guy owned a hair salon and he noticed that the stylist would cut people's hair and then go into the break room and complain about their customers. And he said, this is crazy. These people pay your salary. So he demanded that everyone take the 21-day complaint-free challenge. He gave them all a copy of the book, gave them all a bracelet, said, you got to do this. And half of them walked out. He lost half of his revenue in one day. And he stayed with it. And now he has 2 huge salons, 40 stylists. He makes millions of dollars, but everybody has to take the 21-day challenge.
Oh, that's so cool. That's a good example.
And when you make it, he pays you a week's salary once you hit the 21 days out of his own pocket. And so now everybody talks about they want to go to this complaint-free hair salon.
Did you ever speak at that hair salon or to the employees?
No, but we did a movie called The Complaint-Free Revolution, and we went there and we interviewed several of the people, and they're in it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That would be good for your show, though, to do it at businesses and show how businesses can turn around.
The biggest thing for businesses that we always stress, or that I stress, is that they have found that organizations with a high degree of complaining tend to have much higher rates of absenteeism and turnover. So there is a real bottom line expense for businesses that are not developing. Because I always say this is about healthy communication skills. They need to create avenues for people to provide feedback, to talk about what's going on, et cetera, because people are they're going to express their opinions, and either you let them talk to you or they're going to talk to each other and build dissent and unhappiness.
Do you have a mantra or quote that you live by?
I do. It's funny that you should ask me that. I actually got it from Brian Tracy, and it's one I just run over and over in my head all the time. It's I like myself. If I like myself, I'm willing to do things for myself. I'm more willing to go to the gym. I'm more willing to do interviews. I'm more willing to work harder, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's my whole thing. Because I grew up in a family that did everything it could for me not to like myself. And so now my goal is to just counter program my brain.
And you think about that all the time.
I do.
That runs through your head.
When I'm at the gym, it's 1, I like myself. 2, I like myself. That's how I count them.
That's so cool.
Thank you.
And do you feel like, when did you start doing that?
Probably a year or so ago.
Has that made a big difference for you?
It really has. Little things like social anxiety, things like that. I went to a party with a whole bunch of very, very wealthy, successful people that might have made me a little bit more anxious. And I walked around just going, I like myself. I like myself. And they liked me as a result. That's the other interesting thing. The more you like yourself, the more other people like you.
If you don't like yourself, how are others going to like you?
Exactly.
I mean, thank you for sharing that with us. I really like that. I think you have a book idea there as well.
Yeah, very likely.
I think it's a pretty cool idea. That's a simple, effective tool. Maybe it's a short story, but you can expand it. I think that mindset is almost an evolution of, stop complaining, start living. It's like an evolution of that. It really is very natural, I think. We do on the show inspirations of the week, and I'll go first so you can think of what might be your inspiration. But one inspiration that I had is we have company values, and like every company should have those. I talk about values all the time, and we've had the same company values since we started the company about 18 years ago. And we started with a list of 7. They're how we do performance reviews. They're culturalized. They're on the walls. They're in like journals when you get hired. They're on our, swag. But we recently did an audit and we updated our values based on where we want to pivot and take the company. And we created more energy with the values. Instead of just having one word, we have, more active expressions of our values. So we recently changed them, and we're going to launch them to the company kind of to re-energize the company, to get our mojo back a little bit. But my inspiration of that was having values is critical, but you have to do a values audit. I wish I had done it sooner. Not that I regret it, because I'm happy that we did it. But I think always auditing your values, probably personally as well as if you're running a business, is very important, because those are the things that are repeatable and that you expect the way people to behave at work and to approach clients and projects and collaboration. I think they're really important. So my inspiration of the week is doing a values audit for either your company or yourself.
As far as an audit goes, it's interesting you say that, because I just spent a month going through all of our email campaigns and updating them and making sure they're just excellent, because we always want to present as excellent for the world. For me, as far as an inspiration, we have been talking in my business lately more and more about this concept, which my good friend Joe Vitale talks a lot about. The universe values speed. The universe values speed. When a prospect says they are interested in having me come to speak, I shouldn't put it into my calendar. I should pick up the phone and call them right then. Or when my business manager is on the phone, she knows my calendar and she can say, let's get Will on the Zoom call right now just so you can meet him. Things like that, following up immediately, staying on top of things, that the universe values speed. And we have, whenever we see like a lull in our, like I've got a speaker training program, I've got several things now. Whenever we start to see a lull, it's that we need to speed up. We need to move in that direction because it then moves towards you.
I like the universe value speed. It's almost a anti-procrastination message, which is so easy to say, I'll get to that on Friday. Mm-hmm. And then it's Tuesday, and then it's Thursday.
And then you get to, well, I've put it off so long, I guess I might as well not do it,
Yeah. Do you have a recent lesson that you learned? Something that you came across that you're like, oh, that's something I need to really think about?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And so I'll give you a very honest answer. The drivers in South Florida, Miami South, and I live in Key Largo, about an hour south of Miami. I've never encountered anything like the drivers here. They are aggressive, puts it mildly. It's literally, and I'm just stating facts, not complaining. It's brake checking, trying to swerve into you, et cetera, et cetera. And I've tried everything. I've tried speeding up, slowing down, et cetera. And I finally just, and this to me is a good metaphor for my life, drive your drive. Just drive your drive. In other words, I set my cruise control at, 7 minutes, 7 miles above the speed limit, get in the right lane. And if they want to do 120, which a lot of people do down here, I just drive my drive.
And don't worry about others.
Yeah.
It's a metaphor for life, not just for the fast lane. That's really cool. A lesson that I've learned is when you're running a business, sometimes you're playing whack-a-mole. There's always like a problem's fixed and another problem pops up, and that problem's fixed, another problem pops up. And I'm trying to get more zen with it and realize that not everything needs equal weight and not everything needs fixing at the same time. Like you need to really prioritize the problem areas and focus only on those and let the other ones wait. And so the universe does value speed, but the universe also values speed and focus, I think.
Right. And not indiscriminate action. You want to be focused on what deserves your focus in that moment, what needs to be addressed.
All right, last question for you is I like to double dog dare the audience to do something different after they listen to this podcast. Yours might be 21 days. That might be an obvious one. Mine was, and I'll let you say what yours is, but mine is to think about a friend that you've lost contact with, or even a client that you think could use a thoughtful boost of some kind, and don't put it off, but do something for that friend, client, or family member this week that will surprise and delight them.
That's a great idea. My double dog dare would be try and go one day without complaining. Just notice when you do, and more importantly, why you do it. And what you'll begin to notice is that there are ways to reframe your conversations and get all of your social needs met without putting ear pollution out into the world. You can ask for what you want, and you can talk about what's going on, and you can use facts which are neutral. So give it a try. Just notice it. It's amazing.
I love that. And where can people find you?
The best place I would say is through acomplaintfreeworld.org. That's acomplaintfreeworld.org.
I love that. Will, thanks for being on the podcast. I like you. I like myself. And I particularly liked our conversation. So thanks for being on with the podcast and talking about the soul and science of movements.
My honor, Jason. Thanks for having me. I
Soul and Science is a Mechanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, Tyler Nielsen, Emma Swanson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris.